Finally, let's explore Linnea Airey's phases of word reading. Linnea Airey also conducted a meta-analysis study. Over several decades, she looked at the process that students use in order to achieve proficient word level reading. What she discovered is that students actually move through a number of phases on that path. Students begin in the pre-alphabetic phase, then move into the early alphabetic phase, followed by the late alphabetic phase, and finally the consolidated alphabetic phase. She also shares with us some overarching conclusions. Students move through every single phase. Phases cannot be skipped. Some students may move quickly or more slowly through those phases, but they simply do not skip over a phase in this process. She also shared with us that students can be in multiple phases at the same time. As new concepts are introduced, we know that students may need to move back a phase in order to achieve accuracy and automaticity with those particular concepts. Let's dive into each of the phases that Linnea Airey shared with us. Let's begin with the pre-alphabetic phase. In the pre-alphabetic phase, students are not yet reading. They're simply trying to make sense of the environment around them. But they are beginning to realize that some of the visual images in their environment tell us things and tell us that, for instance, this happens to be the zoo. Students are not noticing the letters or even the word zoo, but they know the sign indicates we have arrived at the zoo. This same process happens when they are processing logos or different logographic information. They know that when they arrive at the restaurant with the golden arches, they know the food that's available there. But again, they're not seeing an M, they're not seeing even a letter or a word. They're simply using it as an incidental visual cue. They know that these cues convey messages. They know that they tell us certain things about where we've arrived or what is possible inside that particular location, but it does not have any connection at this point to any part of our written language, letters, words, phrases, and sentences. Now on to the early alphabetic phase. In the early alphabetic phase, students will begin to understand the parts of spoken words and how to relate that to our written words. Our instructions should include early phonemic awareness tasks like phoneme matching and phoneme isolation. So we might show students images like a zebra and a zipper and ask them if they begin with the same sound, z. We might even ask students to isolate that first sound in that word and maybe bring it to life with something like a concrete object. We want students to begin to analyze the parts of our spoken words. Students will also begin to build an understanding of the alphabetic principle, that we have these sounds, z, and those sounds are linked to symbols, like the letter Z, or B is linked to the letter B. This, of course, leads to their understanding of the letter names and the letter sounds, as well as that one-to-one correspondence. One-to-one correspondence of the phoneme-grapheme relationships in the early alphabetic phase also helps prepare them for decoding and encoding, better known as spelling. So students will begin to analyze a spoken word like at and connect each of those sounds or phonemes to their corresponding print or graphemes. They can use this to then begin to build additional words into their sight word memory. They can simply add the k sound and suddenly they're up to the word cat. In the early alphabetic phase, students also begin to take those incidental cues that they had seen previously, and they're beginning to see the parts of those words or images that they were seeing previously. They can now recognize that the stop sign has letters on it. It's no longer just a visual image to them. Now on to the late alphabetic or full alphabetic phase. In this phase, students will begin some initial recognition of substructures in our language, things like digraphs, vowel teams. They'll also be involved in slightly more advanced phonemic awareness. They'll begin to blend and segment 3 and 4 phoneme words. They'll have some automatic recognition of those high frequency words because they'll be moving into phrases and sentences. And finally, they'll begin to apply the patterns that they have reached some proficiency with to unknown words. They'll have some confidence in approaching a word that they do not already have stored. So in this phase, we see students who are actively segmenting 4 sound or 4 phoneme words and connecting those to their corresponding graphemes. This will apply to a 2-sound blend, like you see in the word stop. It might even apply to a word like zoo that has a vowel team in it. They're beginning to store more advanced patterns, and of course we want those to be a part of our instruction as well. Finally, we reach the consolidated alphabetic phase. In this phase, students are actively orthographically mapping because they have consolidated phoneme grapheme knowledge. They're blending larger units of our English alphabetic code, like syllable patterns and word families, and they're using or leveraging their proficient phonemic awareness. So they take that word zoo that they have stored and they turn around and they reuse the patterns in that word in order to teach themselves new words. They can teach themselves the word boo, then leverage their phonemic awareness skills by adding the sound, and they have a new word, boom. They can teach themselves the word to, add the sound, and now they have the word tool. Students in the consolidated alphabetic phase are even seeing the ooh in a previous visual cue, like the word Google. Aries phases show us the process that students take and the path that is needed in order to achieve proficient word level reading. We know that students move through each of these phases as they're actively learning how to lift words from the page. Phases cannot be skipped. Students may move slowly or more quickly through certain phases, but they do go through all of these phases. Students can also be in multiple phases at the same time as new concepts are being introduced. We'll take a look at how to infuse our instruction with specific tasks and skills to help students move through these phases a little later on during this course.